Across the mighty Zambezi River, Zambia's President Kenneth Kaunda faced an impossible choice. It was the late 1960s, and the winds of African liberation were whipping across the continent like a storm. To the south, the white minority regime of Ian Smith's Rhodesia clung to power through iron-fisted repression, its unilateral declaration of independence in 1965 a defiant middle finger to Britain's fading empire. Across the border, two rival nationalist armies, ZIPRA, the disciplined Soviet-backed force of Joshua Nkomo's ZAPU, and ZANLA, the Maoist guerrilla vanguard of Robert Mugabe's ZANU, fight not just for victory over Rhodesia, but for dominance in the hearts and minds of their hosts. Zambia, a young nation born from the ashes of colonial northern Rhodesia just 3 years earlier, became the unwilling crucible for this rivalry. Why did Zambia's government, under immense pressure from superpowers and neighbors alike, tilt decisively toward ZIPRA? The answer lay not in ideology alone, but in a web of personal loyalties, economic lifelines, and the raw calculus of survival in a Cold War proxy battleground. This is the history of how Zambia's preference for ZIPRA shaped the Bush War, turning a landlocked haven into a fortress of uneasy alliances and hidden betrayals. The roots of Zambia's affinity for ZIPRA stretched back to the shared scars of British colonialism, a history etched in the red dust of the Copperbelt mines and the vast savannas that once bound northern and southern Rhodesia as uneasy siblings under the Central African Federation. From 1953 to 1963, this ill-fated union, dreamed up by white settlers to pool resources and stifle African nationalism, had forced Zambia's proto-nationalists into a bitter marriage with their southern counterparts. Joshua Nkomo, the towering Debele leader of ZAPU, emerged from this cauldron as a figure of quiet gravitas, his voice a bridge between the Federation's fractious tribes. When the Federation crumbled in 1963, Zambia gained independence first, under Kaunda's United National Independence Party, UNIP, while Rhodesia dug in its heels, rejecting majority rule and spiraling toward UDI. Kaunda, a devout Christian and humanist philosopher king, saw in Nkomo a kindred spirit. Both men were moderates at heart, favoring negotiation over force, with their philosophies rooted in non-tribal unity and Pan-African solidarity. Nkomo, exiled to Lusaka after ZAPU's ban in 1962, set up shop in the Zambian capital, his presence a living reminder of the Federation's unfinished business. ZIPRA, ZAPU's military wing, formed in 1964 under Jason Moyo's steely direction, was born in these Lusaka safe houses. Unlike the fiery young radicals of ZANU, split from ZAPU in 1963 over accusations of Nkomo's softness toward whites, ZIPRA embodied a Soviet-style professionalism, conventional tactics, rigorous training, and a multi-ethnic cadre that mirrored Zambia's own mosaic of Bemba, Tonga, and Lozi peoples. Geography sealed the pact. The Zambezi River, Africa's fourth longest, formed a natural gateway from Zambia's western provinces into Rhodesia's Matabeleland, ZIPRA's heartland. Crossing points like Faira and Kazoangula became clandestine arteries for infiltration, far more accessible than the eastern escarpments ZANLA favored from Mozambique. By 1966, ZIPRA's first joint operation with South Africa's Spear of the Nation, the ANC's armed wing, launched from Zambian soil, raiding Wankie Colliery in a bold, if doomed, incursion. Kaunda, despite his aversion to violence, turned a blind eye, viewing ZIPRA as an extension of his own anti-colonial crusade. Soviet advisors, funneled through Lusaka's Soviet embassy, transformed ZIPRA camps like Nampundwe and Chekwe into fortresses of T-55 tanks and SA-7 missiles, a stark contrast to ZANLA's ragtag Maoist cells. But the preference deepened through the crisis. In 1967, Rhodesian forces, aided by South African police, crushed ZIPRA's early incursions, forcing Nkomo to plead for Zambian sanctuary. Kaunda obliged, not out of altruism alone, but pragmatism. ZIPRA's presence deterred Rhodesian reprisals against Zambia's vulnerable northern border. ZANLA, meanwhile, chafed under this shadow. Formed in Tanzania in 1965, its cadres, mostly Shona youth indoctrinated in Chinese guerrilla doctrine, trickled into Lusaka camps, but tensions simmered. ZANLA's revolutionary zeal, with its emphasis on peasant mobilization and people's war, clashed with Zambia's orderly bureaucracy. Reports of ZANLA recruits clashing with locals over resources strained Kaunda's patience, while ZIPRA's disciplined ranks, swollen to 20,000 by 1979, integrated seamlessly, even sharing intelligence with Zambian security. The intrigue thickened in 1974 with the assassination of ZANU's Herbert Chitepo in Lusaka, a car bomb that rocked the city and ignited paranoia. Kaunda, furious at the breach of his soil, rounded up ZANU leaders, including Mugabe, and detained them in Zambian prisons. Whispers pointed to ZANU infighting, but the fallout was seismic. ZANLA's command was crippled, its operations shifting eastward to Frelimo-controlled Mozambique after 1975 independence. ZIPRA, unscathed and loyal, filled the vacuum. Kaunda's détente efforts with Smith, brokered by Zambia's economic desperation amid oil shocks, further aligned him with Nkomo's negotiation-first stance. As Rhodesian jets bombed ZIPRA camps in retaliation for the 1978 downing of Air Rhodesia Flight 825, Kaunda's resolve hardened. ZIPRA was family, ZANLA an unpredictable guest. This bond, forged in Federation's fire and tempered by shared peril, set the stage for Zambia's pivotal role, not as neutral host, but as ZIPRA's steadfast patron. As the 1970s dawned, Lusaka transformed from a sleepy backwater into a Cold War chessboard, where CIA whispers mingled with KGB briefings and Chinese envoys peddled AK-47s in dimly lit bazaars. Zambia's preference for ZIPRA was no mere caprice. It was a high-stakes gamble in the superpower rivalry that could topple Kaunda's regime or crown him Africa's elder statesman. The Soviet Union, eyeing Rhodesia as a domino in its African push, poured resources into ZIPRA. By 1977, Cuban trainers in Angola's Luina camps drilled 6,000 ZIPRA cadres in blitzkrieg tactics, envisioning a storming-the-heavens invasion from Zambian bases. This conventional edge, tanks rumbling across the Zambezi, MiG fighters on standby, dovetailed with Kaunda's security needs. ZIPRA's Soviet alignment mirrored Zambia's own flirtations with Moscow for arms and loans, a bulwark against South African incursions. ZANLA, backed by Maoist China, embodied the ideological foil. Mugabe's forces, emphasizing protracted people's war and rural encirclement, relied on ideological fervor over hardware. Chinese advisors in Tanzania's Itumbi camp drilled ZANLA in fish-in-the-sea tactics, but when they sought Zambian bases, friction erupted. ZANLA's 1974-75 internal purges, culminating in the ZIPRA mutiny of radical youth, spilled into Lusaka, with cadres accusing ZIPRA of sabotage. Kaunda, scarred by Chitepo's murder, expelled ZANLA elements, branding them anarchists who endangered his humanist vision. By 1976, as Mozambique opened its borders post-independence, ZANLA decamped en masse, leaving ZIPRA unchallenged in Lusaka's sprawling camps like Mukushi, where 10,000 fighters honed urban assault skills. Economic vice grips amplified the tilt. Rhodesia's UDI triggered UN sanctions, but Zambia, 90% dependent on copperbelt exports routed through the south, suffered most. The Kariba Dam, a Federation-era lifeline, powered Lusaka, while Bight Bridge ferried Zambian goods through Rhodesian hands. Kaunda's 1973 border closure in protest of Smith's raids backfired spectacularly. Fuel shortages idled factories, and inflation soared to 200%. Desperate, he negotiated backchannels with Smith, allowing selective trade, Zambian copper for Rhodesian maize, under the table. ZIPRA, with Nkomo's moderation, posed less threat to this fragile equilibrium. Its incursions were calculated, avoiding the indiscriminate terror ZANLA unleashed in eastern Rhodesia. ZANLA's 1972 Altina farm attack, sparking full-scale war, drew Rhodesian fury northward, bombing Zambian infrastructure like the Kafaway Gorge Power Station. ZIPRA's restraint, focusing on Matabeleland sabotage, spared Kaunda such blowback. Intrigue peaked in 1978's Détente Gambit, a US and South African plot to sideline radicals. Kaunda hosted talks in Lusaka, aligning with Nkomo's willingness to negotiate, while Mugabe boycotted, decrying it as betrayal. ZIPRA's high command under Dumiso Debengwa played along, using the lull to stockpile Soviet SAMs that downed 2 Air Rhodesia Viscounts, killing 107 civilians. The outrage was global, but Kaunda shielded Nkomo, expelling only token ZANLA sympathizers. Rhodesia's Operation Gatling raid on ZIPRA's Westlands HQ near Lusaka, destroying Nkomo's home, tested the alliance, yet Kaunda doubled down, framing it as Rhodesian barbarism. By 1979, ZIPRA's 20,000-strong force, bolstered by ANC's Spear of the Nation, overwhelmed Zambian resources, sparking internal unrest. Yet Kaunda persisted, seeing ZIPRA as a counterweight to ZANLA's expansionism. This era's shadows revealed Zambia's calculus. ZIPRA's Soviet might deterred Pretoria, its moderation preserved trade veins, and its loyalty repaid Kaunda's gamble. ZANLA, with its chaotic zeal and Chinese strings, threatened to ignite a border inferno Zambia couldn't afford. As Lancaster House loomed, Lusaka's choice echoed across the frontline states, tipping the war's balance toward unity, or so it seemed. By December 1979, as Lancaster House Accords silenced the guns, the Zambezi's banks teemed with weary victors assembling under British eyes. ZIPRA's vast columns, trucks laden with Soviet artillery snaking into Ntambane and Nkai camps, symbolized Zambia's triumph in nurturing a force that helped birth Zimbabwe. Yet the dawn cracked with fissures, as internecine hatreds long suppressed in Lusaka's camps erupted into a reckoning that nearly unraveled the new nation. Zambia's favoritism, once a strategic masterstroke, sowed seeds of distrust that bloomed into the Guko-Orahundi massacres, haunting the region to this day. ZIPRA's returnees, battle-hardened and multi-ethnic, dwarfed ZANLA's Shona-dominated ranks in assembly points. Integration into the Zimbabwe National Army promised unity, but old scores demanded blood. In November 1980, whispers of a ZIPRA coup, fueled by arms caches allegedly hidden in Matabeleland, ignited clashes at Ntambane. ZANLA loyalists, fresh from Mozambique's politicized fronts, viewed ZIPRA as sellouts for their Zambian coziness and Soviet conventionalism. Gunfire echoed through Bulawayo, claiming 300 lives in days of fratricide. Mugabe, now prime minister, eyed ZIPRA's arsenal warily. 20,000 fighters, T-34 tanks, and SAM batteries that could topple his fragile coalition. Kaunda watched from Lusaka with paternal concern, his decades-long nurturing of Nkomo now a double-edged sword. ZIPRA's discipline, honed in Zambian barracks, made it a professional army, but its Ndebele core alienated ZANU's Shona base. ZANLA's Maoist indoctrination, with its cult of the vanguard, bred paranoia. Cadres branded ZIPRA imperialist puppets for Soviet ties, ignoring Zambia's role as honest broker. As 1981 dawned, Mugabe purged ZAPU ministers, discovering arms dumps that confirmed ZIPRA's contingency plans. Nkomo fled to exile, his Lusaka home a sanctuary once more, while 3,000 ZIPRA dissidents took to the bush, ambushing ZNA patrols in a low-boil insurgency. The intrigue deepened with North Korean advisors arriving in Harare, ostensibly for ZNA training but whispering anti-ZIPRA doctrines. Kaunda mediated frantically, hosting Nkomo in 1982 amid Bulawayo bombings, but Mugabe's 5th Brigade, Korean-trained ZANLA veterans, marched into Matabeleland. Guko-Orahundi, the early rain that washes away chaff, claimed 20,000 Ndebele lives by 1987, a genocide veiled as counter-dissidents. ZIPRA's ghosts haunted the killing fields. Cadres tortured for Zambian collaboration, villages razed for harboring Nkomo loyalists. Zambia's preference, born of Federation bonds and Cold War pragmatism, fueled this ethnic inferno, as ZANLA's ascendancy marginalized the very force that had stabilized Lusaka's flanks. Yet redemption flickered. The 1987 Unity Accord, brokered partly through Kaunda's backchannels, merged ZANU and ZAPU into ZANU-PF, folding ZIPRA remnants into the state. Nkomo became vice president, a nod to Lusaka's legacy. Kaunda's gamble secured a neighbor's freedom, but at the cost of blood ties severed across the Zambezi.